And let me take a step back for a second. What we've done so far is we've talked about what gets in the way, which is the noise. We've talked about the solar technique, which is really the management of nonverbal behavior in a way that builds powerful relationships and allows us to connect with people. We've talked about getting greater understanding and a couple tools we can use to gain that greater understanding. But eventually what has to happen is that we have to have that understanding and then demonstrate to our communication partner that we understand them in the way that they intend. And that's this third step of communicating that understanding. And I know that I don't remember who it was, but when I asked the question about what's different about this model, you very accurately pointed out the idea that we're communicating our understanding. We're making sure that we understand what a person's saying in the way that they actually intend. And that's what this third step in the process is. And it's the last step in that listening and understanding process. And there's three things I have mentioned here. The first is demonstrate empathy. And the point I want to make with that is that this is an empathy-based model. Let me say that again. This is an empathy-based model. It's based on the idea that if you listen first, if you understand where another person's coming from, and if you communicate that understanding, you are going to be very powerfully demonstrating empathy. You're going to be able to connect with people very powerfully, even people with significant differences, be they cultural or otherwise, because you are doing a great job of saying to that person, both verbally and really in terms of your actions, that I am listening and I genuinely want to understand where you're coming from. That's what empathy is all about. In fact, the best definition I ever heard of empathy is it's the ability to put on another person's shoes, walk around in them, and experience the world from their perspective. And don't get me wrong, I don't want you wearing other people's shoes. That's not necessary. But it is necessary to really help or to really take a concerted step forward to truly try to understand where another person's coming from. And again, I'm not saying that every single time you have a conversation it gets that deep and that you have to actually be spending hours with the person to try to understand where they're coming from and things of that nature. I am saying that in circumstances in which noise is potentially high, it will tend to take a little bit more time and a little bit more concerted effort in terms of, and conscious effort in terms of being empathetic to try to understand where someone's coming from. The second thing is, under communicate that understanding, is active listening. And I believe active listening is the single most powerful communication tool in existence. Because what active listening is about, it's about articulating or paraphrasing what someone has said to you in a way that reflects both the content and the affect of what they're saying. And that's really important. It reflects both the content and the affect. So if Julie and I are having a conversation, in the conversation I think I have a good idea of where she's coming from, I might simply utilize an active reflection or active listening statement such as, it sounds like you're upset because of the changes that they decided to make in that meeting. Now, what did I do when I said that? I said, first of all, it sounds like you're upset, so I identified an emotion. I identified the affect of what we were discussing. And then the second thing I said is because of the changes they decided to make in that meeting. That's the content. She has an affect because of that content. And a good active listening statement reflects both of those. It has both an affect and the actual content. To give you some sentence prefixes to help you do an active listening reflective statement more effectively, there's two that I use a lot, and I just use one. And that is, it sounds like. It sounds like you're upset because of the changes that they made in that meeting. Another one that I use sometimes is what I hear you saying. What I hear you saying is you're upset because of the changes that they made in the meeting. Now here's the power of active listening, and here's why it works so well. Julie may say to me, what, have you not been paying attention? That's not the issue at all. And that's okay because I've actually checked out my understanding with her. And maybe I'm going to be right and maybe I'm going to be wrong, but if I'm wrong, she can correct me. So I might say, it sounds like you're upset because of the changes that they made in the meeting. And she might say, I'm really not upset, but I do think that those changes are going to create some problems for us. And now I have a higher level of understanding of where she's coming from. Everybody follow that? Everybody got that? Very, very powerful technique. It's a very, very powerful tool. Almost none of us use it. I mean, that's just the reality. Very, very few people use it. And again, I'm not saying that every single time you have a conversation you need to use it. I would suggest that you wait until circumstances in which the noise is potentially relatively high. Okay? And then the last piece there, use self-disclosure. I want to just spend a moment on this because I want to emphasize something. Now, self-disclosure by definition is simply demonstrating to your communication partner that you have experiences that are similar to theirs, perhaps in a particular way, and that you can relate to where they're coming from. And self-disclosure can be very, very powerful because remember earlier when I said that we don't always take advantage of our similarities in terms of using them as a bridge to build across our differences? Self-disclosure is a powerful tool for utilizing our similarities to build a bridge across differences. Because I might say to Julie that, you know what, I can relate to that because I had a similar experience. And all of a sudden, whereas she may not have understood that I could relate to where she's coming from, by talking about that similar experience, she could say, oh, he does understand where I'm coming from. He has dealt with this before. So that's a bridge that's allowing us to connect. But there's a danger there. Sometimes people misuse self-disclosure. And they say, I can relate to where you're coming from because of A, B, and C. And the problem is the person says, no, that's not what I'm talking about. And that's not really good for the relationship building process. So you have to be really careful and make sure that you truly understand and you can truly connect to it in terms of a particular experience where somebody's coming from. With that in mind, let me give you a couple of sentence prefixes that you can use to give a good self-disclosure statement. One is, I've had a similar experience. And the reason I like I've had a similar experience is because that's what self-disclosure is. It's speaking to the fact that you've had a similar experience that you can relate to, and you want to demonstrate that connectivity between the two of you. And the second thing is, that's something I can relate to. If somebody tells you something and you can truly relate to it, you can simply say, that's something I can relate to.